You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. There's a moment in life when something you hear stops you in your tracks. It might be a sentence in a book, a quiet line in a movie, or even a phrase whispered by a stranger. And in that moment, you know you're not going to see the world the same way again. That's the kind of moment Rumi has been giving people for over 700 years. His words have traveled across centuries, across languages, across faiths and cultures, landing in the hearts of people who don't even share his history, yet feel like they've known him forever. And here's the strange thing: science is finally catching up to what Rumi was saying all along. Modern physics talks about how everything in the universe is connected. Neuroscience tells us our brains are wired for love, empathy, and connection. Psychology speaks of how our inner wounds can transform us. And Rumi, he was saying all of this in the 13th century, not through formulas or experiments, but through poetry, through the language of the soul. He said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." And today, brain researchers tell us that pain rewires the brain, often opening pathways for growth, compassion, and creativity. He spoke of love as the force that turns copper into gold. And physicists today tell us that the universe itself is an alchemy, transforming stars into planets, chaos into order. To Rumi, love wasn't a topic. It was the law of the universe. Think about this. When Rumi speaks of longing, he's not talking about a small, private feeling. He's talking about the same longing the universe had at the very beginning, that mysterious spark that made nothing want to become something. Modern cosmology calls it the Big Bang. Rumi would simply call it love's first breath. And if you think that's just poetic exaggeration, consider this: the atoms in your body, the carbon in your skin, the oxygen in your blood, the iron in your heart were forged in the core of ancient stars. Science tells us we are literally made of stardust. Rumi would say, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." He didn't just mean that metaphorically. He meant it as a deep truth. We are the universe becoming aware of itself. Every heartbeat, every thought, every longing for something beyond the ordinary is the cosmos remembering itself through us. And this is why his words still land like a revelation, because he speaks in a language our DNA already knows. We may not always understand it with the mind, but the soul recognizes it instantly. And maybe this is why Rumi begins his greatest work, the Masnavi, with the sound of the reed flute. "Listen to the reed and the tale it tells," he writes. "The reed has been cut from its home by the riverbank, and it sings of separation. Science might call this a metaphor for the human condition, the way our consciousness feels, like it's been cut from some greater whole. Neuroscience might say that our sense of self is just a construct, a story our brain tells to make sense of experience. But Rumi understood the deeper ache beneath all of that, the homesickness for something we can't name, the memory of belonging that no physical place can give us. And here's the thing, even in 2025, with all our technology, with rockets on Mars and quantum computers in our pockets, that feeling hasn't gone away. If anything, it's stronger. We're connected to more people than ever, yet loneliness has become a modern epidemic. We can talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime, and still feel like something is missing. Rumi would tell us that what's missing is not outside, it's inside. Your task, he said, is not to seek for love, but to find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. And when we hear that, we realize he's not just talking about romance. He's talking about the whole structure of our lives, the way we build walls with fear, the way we hide behind certainty, the way we cling to identity and control, not realizing that in doing so, we cut ourselves off from the very thing we're looking for. Rumi once told his students, "Die before you die, and you will live forever." To many, that sounds like a poetic metaphor about letting go of fear. But Rumi meant it very literally. The ego, the false self, must dissolve before we can taste the fullness of life. Today, neuroscientists studying meditation, deep prayer, and even psychedelic therapy have stumbled on something fascinating. When people have profound spiritual experiences, the part of the brain known as the default mode network, the area that constructs our sense of I, our running mental story, quiets down or even goes silent. In those moments, people report feeling more connected to everything around them, less separate, less afraid. They often use the same words Rumi used 800 years ago: oneness, light, union. This isn't just an idea in a book. It's measurable. Brain scans show it. Heart monitors register the calm. And yet, Rumi didn't need an MRI machine to know this truth. He lived it. He said, "Be like a melting snow. Wash yourself off yourself." When the snow melts, it doesn't disappear. It becomes part of the river, the ocean, the rain. And that's exactly what happens to us when we let go of the ego. We don't vanish. We expand. In Rumi's time, the ego wasn't a word people used in the modern psychological sense, but he understood its nature better than most psychologists. Today, he saw it as the veil between the soul and the beloved, the layer of illusion that makes us think we are separate, that we must protect ourselves, defend ourselves, control the outcome of everything. Science might call it a survival mechanism, the brain's way of keeping us alive in a dangerous world. But survival is not the same as living. And Rumi wasn't interested in mere survival. He was interested in the kind of living where every breath is worship, where every glance reveals the divine. He spoke of it in images. The moth that doesn't just circle the flame, but flies straight into it. The drop of water that doesn't just dream of the ocean, but merges with it. To a biologist, the moth's dive into the flame is suicide. To Rumi, it's liberation. And here's the mystery. Modern psychology has discovered that when people let go of rigid control, when they surrender to something greater than themselves, whether that's love, creativity, faith, or the flow of life, they often experience more joy, more resilience, and more purpose than those who spend their days guarding against loss. But surrender isn't easy, especially in a culture that teaches us to build and protect an image. In the United States today, we are trained almost from birth to define ourselves by achievement, appearance, possessions, and opinions. The more we identify with those, the more fragile we become, because all of those things can change or be taken away. Rumi would call this a kind of prison we build ourselves. He'd say, try to accept the changing seasons of your soul like you accept the seasons of the year. Just as winter doesn't fight to be summer, we shouldn't fight the transformations life asks of us. And yet, in neuroscience, we now understand why this is so hard. The brain treats loss of identity as a threat to survival, releasing stress hormones and triggering fear responses. That's why letting go feels like dying. But Rumi's point was that this death, the death of the ego, is not the end. It's the doorway. Try to accept changing seasons wasn't just good advice. It was an invitation to step into a reality where you are not your labels, not your fears, not even your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them, the silent witness that watches them come and go. And maybe that's why, even now, his poems cut through noise the way lightning splits the sky. He doesn't argue with you. He doesn't lecture. He simply points you back to what you've always known. He'd say, don't get lost in your mind's arguments. Step into your heart's knowing. And when you do, you find something remarkable. Science, for all its instruments and theories, can only measure pieces of this truth. But living it doesn't require any measurement at all. The quiet mind, the open heart, the sense of being part of something vast and alive, These are as real as gravity and just as binding. Rumi often said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." To most people, that sounds like poetry, but modern science quietly agrees. Quantum physics tells us that at the smallest scale, reality is not made of separate objects, but of relationships, fields, and entanglements. Particles that were once together remain mysteriously connected, even when separated by vast distances. To Rumi, this wasn't a strange scientific curiosity. It was the natural order of love. He would say that separation is only an illusion. We believe because we are looking with the eyes of the body, not the eyes of the soul. And science, in its own way, has been proving that for decades. Astronomers tell us the light we see from distant stars is billions of years old, meaning when we look at the night sky, we are seeing not just space, but time itself, the memory of the universe. Rumi would nod and say, "Yes, and the stars are looking back at you." He meant that you are not outside of this vast story. You are the story. Every breath you take is the earth breathing. Every heartbeat is a pulse of the cosmos. And in this way, he bridges the gap between science's grand scale and the intimacy of human experience. But Rumi never wanted his students to stop at wonder alone. Wonder was the doorway. Transformation was the destination. He would use the language of love because love is the one force every human understands. Yet it is also the most misunderstood. In modern culture, love is often narrowed to romance or attraction. But Rumi's love was cosmic. It was the same force that pulls planets into orbits, that makes seeds reach for the sun, that makes human beings risk everything for a glimpse of truth. Today, biologists describe how life itself seems wired for cooperation, how ecosystems thrive on interdependence, how even our bodies are not single entities, but entire communities of cells, bacteria and unseen organisms working together. This mirrors Rumi's belief that nothing is alone. Even the reed flute, singing its song of separation, is not truly separate. Its longing is proof of its connection. And here's where the science meets the spirit. We now know that the human heart generates an electromagnetic field measurable several feet beyond the body. In other words, your presence literally reaches into the space around you, affecting others in ways you can't see. Rumi would say, "This is why the company you keep matters, because love or fear radiates outward." We are not just sharing words with each other. We are sharing fields of energy, and so, after all the science and all the poetry, we arrive at Rumi's most radical idea, that the beloved we search for is not out there, somewhere distant, waiting To be found, the beloved is inside. Every longing is not a call to travel outward, but to return inward. Neuroscience might call this self-awareness. Spirituality calls it awakening. Rumi calls it going home. He tells us, what you seek is seeking you, not because it's a nice thought, but because it's the truth of how reality works. The same intelligence that shaped galaxies is shaping you. The sunsets is whispering through your thoughts, your dreams, your sudden bursts of courage. And when you realize this, the fear of being alone dissolves. You see that even your pain has been a kind of guidance, a rough map drawn in the language of longing. This is why he says, don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure. Science might study the brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to rewire after hardship. But Rumi knew that the soul, too, can grow new wings from the scars of its past. And so he leaves us with an invitation not to admire his words, but to live them. Let yourself burn for what is true. Let the false fall away. Let love, in all its cosmic and human forms, undo you until there's nothing left but the vast, eternal awareness you have always been. Close your eyes, as he says. Fall in love and stay there, because the moment you do, you are already home.